Okay, 2 weeks ago, Alan and I went to Kansas City, which I learned this morning is famous not just for having the 2025 General Synod of the United Church of Christ, but it is famous as the birthplace of Linda Avignon. This is Kansas City, Missouri. There are two Kansas cities. So I'm going to talk today about what we learned there. Alan will also be contributing here, but it's mostly going to be me. And do interrupt if you have questions about anything. The theme of this General Synod, which is a meeting of all the officials and delegates of the United Church of Christ. There were 1,900 people registered attendance, so it was really a big event. The theme was Into the Deep, which comes from this verse from Luke. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." I have no idea why they chose this as a theme. It seems sort of like, it's a great verse, but we missed the very first meeting of the whole group, which was in the afternoon while we were still on an airplane. And maybe they explained, we have no idea why they chose this theme, but there were references to letting down nets and into the deep in various titles of things that you'll probably see and that I won't say anything about. So the first thing we did was we went to our hotel, and then we went to the convention center, which you'll see lots of pictures of. It's a very, very large convention center. And at registration, can I have that, Mike? We got a bag that says Into the Deep on it, and a whole bunch of things. I'll show you my name badge later. And, there was swag in the bag. And then we went back to the convention center for our first plenary, which I said we missed the first one. So for them, a plenary was just a meeting of the whole group. We went to plenary number 2, and it was okay that we had missed plenary number 1 because that was about how to do the voting, which delegates could do. We weren't delegates. We were visitors. We paid the same amount, I believe, as the delegates, but we didn't get to vote. And some meetings we didn't get to participate in. But, that was okay. This was the first time we'd ever done anything like this, so it was fine. Okay, so Alan, help. No. So there were 3 people from our church there, the 2 of us and Pastor Mike. And so you will see one picture of Pastor Mike later. So plenary number 2 was also just sort of miscellaneous business, introducing people and stuff. But I'm going to show you something about, I should have taken better pictures that showed this, but all the delegates were at tables in the front of the hall, in front of the stage. And then in back of them, in rows, no tables, were the visitors like us. And as I said, there were 1,900 people all told, and they had 5 screens up above. That seem right?
5 or 6 screens, yes.
Lots and lots of really, really big screens you can see there. The people there, sitting there on the right side, are about the distance from these screens that all the people in the back were. But the screens were so big that we had no trouble seeing them. They were way up high. So every time, okay. So, they did things like introduce people. And then we heard a speech from the candidate for AGM. That means Associate General Minister. So the boss of the whole UCC is called the General Minister. There's also apparently a president, and we were never introduced to the president. As far as we know, we don't know who this is. But anyway, you'll hear a lot about the General Minister. This woman, Sherry Prestman, has been serving as acting Associate General Minister And she gave an introductory speech, and then later she was voted to be the actual Associate General Minister. And she gave a really, really good speech. It was the first thing that we really heard from anybody, and it was a very inspiring and good speech. And Pastor Mike mentioned in church, I don't know if any of you picked up on this, I think it was last week, but maybe the week before, that he has gotten her to agree to come and give a guest sermon sometime in the next few months. And so I think you'll like that. She's really good. Okay, so the next day, which was Saturday, the synod began at 6:30 a.m. I don't know if you...
4:30 for us.
Yeah, no, we were... This was on Central Time. So we saw this in the schedule and we thought, do we really want to go to something at 6:30 a.m.? But we did. We didn't know, but luckily they served breakfast, so that made it quite a bit better. So this was a meeting of the Western Regional Caucus, and there were a whole bunch of different caucuses. I can't tell you how many, maybe about 10. And this was just one of these 10 caucuses, and you can see all the areas that they drew churches from. Most UCC churches are in the East and the Midwest. So this was basically almost the whole West, and we are the Southern California, Nevada Conference of UCC, and you can see that all these other areas. At this breakfast meeting, we sat at a table with I think probably 8 other people that we didn't know, all from further east from here, and met a lot of really interesting people, one of whom you will see a picture of later. And our own conference includes over 130 congregations. So you can see how big this whole event was. During the caucus, I would say, what would you say, maybe about 50 people were there? Maybe 60. We had this breakfast. We had gospel singing, prayers, just talking to people, and we heard a number of presentations. There were 2 caucus meetings. I'll tell you about the next one, and each one featured a couple of presentations on some of the resolutions that were going to be voted on in the synod, and you'll hear more about them later. Don't understand this thing? Okay, so the highlight of this caucus meeting was a speech by the general minister, whose name is Karen Georgia Thompson. She has served, she's been a pastor. She's served in a number of roles in UCC administration. She became the general minister at the last synod. She was born in Jamaica. She gave the most wonderful speech. I mean, it really made us feel like this was absolutely worth having come to. I mean, it was one of, I would say, the 2 highlights of the whole meeting in terms of speeches that we heard. And, she's very charismatic and, just fabulous. I mean, I'm in love with Karen George Thompson, and I'm not going to pick that thing up. Okay, so then in the afternoon, we went to plenary number 3, which, among other things, included the first speak out session. This is something where delegates and I think also visitors can get up and go to a microphone, and I think they have to be registered first. They can speak to the whole synod about something on their mind for a total of 1 minute, and they show these on the screens with a countdown going. And I just picked, I went through all the video records of all of the plenaries, looking for things to grab pictures of for you. And so these were just 2 of the speak out things. The most popular speak out, which was not at this plenary, it was at a later one, was a little boy, maybe about 9 or 10, telling jokes. And when his minute was up, the whole plenary said, all together, let him speak more. They were really enjoying the jokes, but they didn't. They cut off people's microphone at 1 minute, so you had to sort of be planned. Okay, so then Karen Georgia Thompson spoke to the whole synod on the state of the church, in plenary number 3. But the highlight of plenary number 3, which was in the afternoon of our first full day, was the keynote speech, which was by Reverend Jennifer Butler. She's a Presbyterian minister, and I will call her a Christian activist. I don't think that's what she calls herself, but she's been arrested many times. She goes to demonstrations and stuff like that. She founded an organization called Faith in Public Life, and she spoke this time about how the Bible should be read as a guide to liberation as opposed to autocracy. And it was just a wonderful speech, and I am hoping that maybe we can get it on video and show it at another ADG, because I think you would really like it, and it raises a number of issues that are really worth discussing. And after the plenary, she signed copies of her book, which is called Who Stole My Bible? It's about how some people appropriate Bible verses out of context to prove points that they are arguing for that maybe, if you look at it in context, don't fit with that. So it's a very good book. I just finished reading it, and I may tell you more about it some other time. Okay, so in the afternoon there were committee meetings. Now, every committee was assigned to consider one of the Synod's proposed resolutions, and delegates, as we understand it, were assigned sort of randomly to these committees. I don't think that they knew what resolution they were going to consider, and I don't think they had any choice about it. I'm not absolutely positive that's how it worked, but talking to people, that seemed to be how it works. And they went through the whole text of each resolution, and the texts could be quite long, many pages. They discussed them and they made changes. And then later they made presentations on these for the whole synod, and they were voted on by all the delegates. So again, we didn't get any votes. But we had the afternoon off, and we went to the exhibit hall, which, like any convention, if you've been to conventions, had lots and lots of interesting things. They had stuff for sale, shirts, hats, gifts, books, miscellaneous UCC swag. You could find out about seminaries, charities, technology, church history, media, social justice, and all kinds of things. There were many, many, many different tables where people talked about things. And I went around to all of them while Alan was busy with what he'll talk to you about later. You could learn about this UCC K-12 curriculum. What is that? Where did that come from? Oh, are you letting somebody in, Ryan? Thank you. Well, we might mention, it was just your thing was on the screen, Ryan, no problem. Yeah. So you could also get free coffee, tea, or water, or you could buy snacks from vendors. And Alan will tell you what he was interested in. I'm going to just tell you some things I got there. Some free, some not free. So, okay. I'm not. Okay, so if you can, I think the audience can see this. Probably people online can't, but well, let's see if I move this way. This is a bag that says "I love data," which, if you know me, is absolutely true. And I got this bag free at one of the tables. But this is my name tag, which has all kinds of useful pockets in it that you can put stuff in. Well, actually, I put my hotel room key in it. So I also got this free thing to stick on it that says Data Nerd, which is, again, me. This is the badge that we got in church on ONA Sunday, but this one I bought. It's a comma, so you guys know about commas and UCC. So anyway, I'm now going to turn the mic over to Alan, because he wants to tell you about the things that he learned about UCC approaches to giving.
So, yeah, this is my new life after I retired, was becoming an amateur retirement and financial planner. And associated with that, after joining the endowment committee, I got very interested in planned giving, but I realized I didn't know much, and I didn't know much about educational resources that were available. I thought this might be a place to come and find some, and that turned out to be true. One of the things I learned about was the pension board, which had they had, I think, the largest exhibit in the exhibit hall. Pension board is doing the work of the angels because they're providing pensions for our ministers, with the help of their congregations, of course. But there are just some very sad stories about ministers whose retirements have been underfunded in the past, and things definitely seem to be improving. But the pension board does a lot of things that are useful to congregations as a whole. One of them is that they have sponsored a piece of software called Free Will. So freewill.com is a very clever business model. This is a group of software developers who said, we're going to make a tool so that people can make wills for themselves, or even living trusts. And they do this by just answering a series of questions, but it's a big branching tree of possibilities without spending too much time themselves. There's just thousands of possible paths that could be followed to creating the will or trust that you most want. Now, an interesting fact is that if you survey UCC congregations as a whole, roughly half of the congregants have no will or trust. Now, I don't think that's true here in Manhattan Beach, probably. But even people who already have one may be interested in signing on. There's a special version of Free Will for UCC members. So if you sign on to freewill.com/UCC, I may talk more about this in the future. You'll get an opportunity to go through the whole process, and when you get to the point where you say, gee, who all might you want to remember as receiving a percentage of your residuary estate, you'll have an option to say, well, my UCC church, which might be a good idea. Anyway, this is a great piece of software, and not just for people who don't have one, but for people who want to experiment with, might I consider changing it? You can build a version. You can take it to your trust attorney and say, this is, I think, something more like what I want to do. And he's got something to work on, he or she has something to work on that's going to get you faster. You'll pay less in attorney's fees. And it's all free because the pension board and United Church Funds have sponsored, along with many other charities, nonprofits around the country, have sponsored their work on developing this tool for so that it can be available to their members. Another interesting thing the pension board does is they try to have a ministry of serving the world by investing in a way that makes sense for the survival of a world that is habitable for human beings. The world is going to survive. The only question is, will it be ruled by descendants of the cockroaches or by descendants of us? And that's why we might care about the environment. And so, good for them. And they're not the only UCC-related organization that's working on sustainable investing. Right there in the same exhibit hall, we could see that there's this group called Creation Care. And if you just search online for Creation Care or UCC Creation Care, you probably get access to this, or you could point your camera at that. But I'm going to zip away from it in a second, so you probably won't have a chance to actually grab that. There was another group called One Home, One Future, which is also interested in environmental stewardship. I think their focus is a little more on environmental justice for people who live closer to the equator, and who, if the current trends continue, all the people who work outside will lose their functioning kidneys before they're 50, because it's just too hot to work. It will be too hot to work outside unless we do something about it. I mentioned United Church Funds earlier. They too had a great exhibit in the hall. They are an organization, unlike the pension board, which works to invest the money that churches send it so that they can provide dignified retirements for our pastors. United Church Funds accepts donations. Well, churches get donations for endowments and other savings that can be used to meet local church needs, and we can choose to invest with United Funds. They're like a kind of a mutual fund set of mutual funds for charitable organizations, church organizations. Another thing I learned is that, unbeknownst to me, UCC has generosity officers, and they are split into 3 parts of the country. The Western generosity officer is James Fowler, who gave a fantastic, rousing speech at, was it our first morning breakfast. He got up, and everybody had just started getting kind of full of breakfast and realizing it was early, and he led everybody in this spiritual hand-clapping praise to the name of Jesus that just woke us all up, and it was really exciting. He's a fantastic guy. One of the things we probably all know about the 5 for 5 donations, 5 times in the year, we have collections for specific UCC purposes. He really cued me in on that, and we've done some more looking into it. In the past, we've given to sometimes we forget one, or we send the money in too late. We're not getting credit for having given this money, and getting the credit is one of the things that might make it possible for us to someday have delegates at meetings of the conference and meetings of we got to look like we're participating. We are participating. We're just not. Anyway, we're going to do better. And he also is an expert on various opportunities to give, lots of different ways to give, including DAFs, donor-advised funds, which there are certain reasons that people who've got fluctuating income and everything, they might decide some years this is a good year to give a bunch to charity that I won't actually distribute right this year. So maybe I'm expecting that this has been a really good year in the stock market. Some of this stuff is overvalued. I'm going to donate it to the DAF fund. I'll get the charity write-off this year, and then I'll distribute it to my charities in future years when I may not be as flush. Anyway, there's a lot of things like this that there's just opportunities. One of the other things, and this doesn't have anything to do with my interest in tawdry money, and that's, I was really impressed by the big tent nature of our denomination. There are a group of churches within UCC that have formed an organization they call Faithful and Welcoming Churches of the UCC. And what this means is we're not all that progressive about doctrinal matters. We're traditional. And they fit in, they're part of UCC. Yes, Pat.
Those of us that were here when the Synod was in Long Beach and volunteered at it, so we've experienced all this. And one thing I liked was this big tent, because I went and got a button that said, "Have you hugged your ECOT today?" And that is evangelical, conservative, orthodox, and traditional.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. So the other thing that you could see the big tent about was that when, I'll come to you in a sec, Sheila, I didn't see your hand right away, is that when they were debating resolutions, people had strong feelings. Everyone was just inspiring in their acceptance of each other. No notions that your comments come from some wrong thinking place. Instead, they said, well, I see it this way, and I think that helps to keep us a big tent. Sheila, did you have a comment? No. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to turn this back to Pam, but that was my bit.
Yeah, well, you're going to hear more about discussion and controversy later, but this was a nice thing. On Saturday night, we took Pastor Mike to a jazz bar called the Phoenix, which is apparently very famous in Kansas City. It would have been there when you were born, I'm sure. It used to be a speakeasy. That was before you were born. And we were there for a couple of hours. We had dinner and drinks, and we listened to a really wide variety of songs by a singer whose name is Piaget. I don't think she was doing any scientific experiments. It's kind of weird name. But she was really, really great. And people could sit at the bar right up there next to her and her band. We were at a table right next to this gentleman whose big head you see in the front. And there were lots of people there, and they were really, really enthusiastic. I mean, it was wonderful. And Pastor Mike seemed to feel that it was an outstanding venue. So it got his seal of approval, which was nice. Okay, on Sunday, once again, the day began with 6:30 a.m. breakfast caucus. And Sherry Prestman, who I mentioned before, she visited the caucus and answered questions about her views and the UCC administration, which she'd already had a lot of experience with, serving as in an acting capacity. And there were 2 more committee reports on proposed resolutions. It wasn't quite as exciting as the first one. Then in the later in the morning, they had what they called workshops, which were opportunities to learn about things that UCC does. 2 workshops. The first one was called The Spirit of Generosity, so that was the kind of thing he was just talking about philanthropy. Then he went to one called Building a Legacy, which was kind of sad. You're seeing on the screen there a case history for a UCC church that closed and how they went about arranging for that without having too much horrible stuff happen. Although there were 1,900 delegates and 130 churches just in our Southern California and Nevada conference, and many, many, many churches all over the country. It is still true that one UCC church closes every 6 days. And this is a very, very sad thing. There are some new ones being established. We talked to one woman who had broken away from her UCC church and formed another UCC church in a small town in Colorado, right? So this is a small town in Colorado that has 2 UCC churches that one broke away from the other because they felt that the older church was spending too much time renovating the fabric of the church and not doing enough social justice. Sure.
I just want to emphasize that our church is not, our church is not, it's actually growing now. So do not despair.
Anyway, that's Alan's experience. I went to a blanket exercise by the Council of Street. What they were talking about how the federal government has little by little taken away so much land from Indians. They did this by having everybody in the meeting, and there were many, many more people than they planned for. They had to keep adding chairs. Everybody was sitting, and they spread out blankets on the floor, and everybody had to stand. They called out your color. You had to sit down because and they landed up with just a few people, but many blanket. And they talked about how this what this all meant and why so many people were sitting down because they or somehow been not federally recognized. There were lots of interesting. Anyway, there were 25 more workshops. I didn't feel like listing them all for you, but you can look there at some of them. Though it was actually hard to find things that you wanted to go to because there were so many choices. Don't you agree, Alan? Alan, he felt that he hadn't gone to the one about closing churches. He thought that was about building a legacy of, something to, yeah. But there were so, and people were really involved in this. So that was a nice opportunity that they had. And then later on Sunday, we only have talked about Sunday morning. First of all, there was a community worship with communion for the 1,900 people. And then after that, there was an anti-ICE rally out on the steps of the convention center. I meant to look up because there's a UCC news release about it, how many people they thought there were. There were certainly several hundred. I don't know. Do you have a feeling for how many people there were? Anyway, they had speakers and people prayed and sang songs and stuff like that. It was really quite inspiring. This thing here, if you can read it, is the flyer we got saying that this was going to happen. And it was really interesting. Could you see the woman in the middle with a clerical collar? By the way, many UCC ministers wear clerical collars. To me, it didn't seem like UCC, but we saw quite a lot at the, yeah. Well, the one, she's holding a picture of, I think, Lupe or something, and a black clerical collar. You're going to see her again, that's why I'm pointing her out. In prayers and worship during that. But after this, we gathered for a group of there over on the right side. Alan has a blue shirt on, and I'm right in front of him. It doesn't matter if you can't see us anyway, we're there. And even after that, they, about 20 of us, most people, but we walked to Senator Josh Hawley's city office. Switch microphones, please. Sure. Which is in the, is that okay? Okay. It's in the Kansas City courthouse, which is under construction. When we got there, we weren't really sure that we were going to be able to get into the office because the whole front of the courthouse is covered with scaffolding and stuff. But we did go in, and at the security guard, we told him that we wanted to talk to Senator Hawley. Our leader there was the woman that you saw before, dressed in white with the clerical collar. Her first name is Sarah, and I don't remember right now her last name, but she is a minister who actually was born in Missouri. And she grew up in a Missouri church, and she introduced herself to the security guard that way. And Hawley was obviously in Washington, D.C. He wasn't there, but one of his staffers came down to talk to us, and our feeling was he would not have come down at all to talk to us, except for the fact that we actually had somebody from Missouri who was a constituent as part of our group. So we told him that we were very concerned about Hawley's vote on the Big Beautiful Bill, particularly after he had written, probably most of you know, he wrote an op-ed against the anti-Medicaid provisions of the bill, but he still voted for it. And so we wanted to talk to him about why he had changed his vote, voted against his conscience. We said to this staffer, who was very polite, but the whole time he was chewing gum while he was talking to us, a lot of people feel that it's sort of rude to be talking to somebody and be chewing gum, but that's what he was doing the whole time. But he was very polite to us. We asked him if he was a person of faith, and he said yes, chewing his gum. We all introduced ourselves. We talked to him about, ICE detentions and how bad we thought this was. Some of our ministers said a couple of prayers, and then we all said the Lord's Prayer together, and he was respectful. I didn't think he was praying with us, but I think you said you thought he was saying the Lord's Prayer with us. I'm not sure. Anyway, we didn't get to go up to Josh Hawley's office, but, that was something that happened. The picture was taken outside the courthouse because apparently there's no photography in our federal courthouse. Sunday evening, we took the evening off. There wasn't anything much happening at the synod. We went to dinner at an Austrian restaurant where we had absolutely fabulous Wiener Schnitzel. Kansas City has a free trolley line that goes from the convention center, maybe even further up from the convention center, to the city's beautiful old train station, which looks kind of like Union Station, not quite as nice, but it's a nice old train station. And we got off, we walked to the train station, then we walked to the restaurant, and we took the trolley back to the hotel, and that was a really nice experience. On Monday, July 14th, there were 3 more plenaries. So it was pretty amazing. We had, first of all, the election of Sherry Presteman. There was lots of recognition and awards for people. They marked 25 years of the Our Whole Lives curriculum, which I mentioned to you, 40 years of open and affirming, and we were proud of MBCC having just finished becoming open and affirming. We learned, and this is relevant for the Big Tent thing, that fewer than 50% of UCC congregations are ONA, which was a great surprise to us because we thought we must be one of the very last congregations to vote for this, but not true at all. I'm going to mention here something that I looked for a picture through all these plenaries. I fast forwarded through all 8 plenaries, 6 of which we went to, and looking for a picture of our old friend Mark Pettis, who we actually saw many times during the synod and talked to quite a lot. And Mike spent an awful long time talking to him, probably telling deep secrets about MBCC. I don't know. And he was there at the synod with his wife and Thomas. You remember Thomas when we knew him as a very little kid. Thomas is now like in middle school, and he's very, very articulate. There was one event that I really thought I could find in the plenary videos, but I wasn't able to, where both Mark and Thomas read part of the text of something recognizing some people, and I would have liked to have been able to show you those pictures, but I wasn't able to. In plenary number 5, they talked about the 300th anniversary of the German Reformed Church, which is a congregation that has, what do they call it? Shared communion? They're in communion with us? Okay, so in communion with means that we have some kind of recognition of this other church. We think they're okay, and I'll talk more about that in just a little bit, because it refers to some of it. It's relevant for some of the resolutions that we'll talk about. They had a presentation by Alan's friends on the pension board at plenary number 5, and plenary number 6, they had a presentation from Alan's friends in United Church Funds, and they talked more about philanthropy. But then in plenary number 6, they started voting on synod resolutions, which continued during plenary number 7 on Tuesday, which was the last one we were able to go to. So this is another view of the delegates at their tables. They voted with an app that they had, and it was very, very comprehensive, and almost all the voting went completely without a hitch. There were a couple of times where they were voting on things that they hadn't planned for, like amendments. where there were slight glitches in the voting, but it all went very well. And as Alan said, everything was really, really respectful, all the discussion. So one resolution combined 4 Pennsylvania UCC conferences. Now, you remember our conference has 130 churches in it, so this was 4 different conferences from Pennsylvania. They probably weren't quite that big, but they combined 4 of them into one big Pennsylvania conference called the Keystone Conference. All the other resolutions considered in committees were presented by committee advocates, and each of them had extensive discussion. Most of them had proposed amendments, and all the discussion followed Robert's Rules of Order. The delegates voted, as I said, with these apps, and all the audience, us and the delegates, could see immediate results of each votes on these screens. I mean, you know, they had voting. The voting was open, I think, for 90 seconds or something like that. They warned them that the voting was almost over. The voting was over, and then maybe like 10 or 20 seconds later, the votes came up on the screen with the, excuse me, pro, con, and abstain votes. So all of the UCC resolutions were accepted. I can't read this without my glasses. So the first 2 there are full communion between UCC and the Evangelische Kirche in Deutschland, which is a German church that is different from the German Reformed Church that we talked about before, and the Iglesia Evangelica Unida de Puerto Rico. There was quite a lot of discussion about the second one because the Puerto Rican church is quite a bit more conservative than UCC, but it came up in that discussion that not all of UCC, in fact, is ONA, and, you know, this church is coming along, and they're, you know, good guys. They recognized a coalition of small town and rural churches, which are called star churches. And then most of the others were political. So, excuse me, declaration of support for Philippine human rights. There's one in the bottom of my purse. Excuse me. So a recognition of the continually evolving language of mental health. This is like, you know, should you call mental illness a disease and things like this? They raised a very large number of points that were really good. My picture here is from one of the women that we met at our first caucus, who is a minister in Rock Springs, Wyoming, where actually Alan's parents used to live. And she's really interesting and a big activist, which is sort of unusual in Rock Springs, Wyoming, I will tell you. And she made an amendment. She offered an amendment to the mental health resolution, which was the only amendment that the moderator of the session said, maybe we can accept this with a voice vote. Everybody thought that it was a really, you know, good and necessary amendment. She was saying that you should also recognize the disability aspects of mental health. They were talking about different conditions that people might need mental health help for. There was a thing about violence against religious minorities in India, which was one of the presentations we heard in our caucus. A declaration of support for immigrants, refugees, and Pacific Island communities. That was an anti-ICE resolution. In support of restoration of full funding for USAID and the Voice of America. And then finally, the last resolution that they talked about was a declaration for an end to genocide in Palestine. Now, you can see that the language there is really, really strong language, just using the word genocide, although many of us would agree that genocide is what's going on in Palestine. lots of people are, once you say the word genocide, they're very offended. And so there was lots and lots of discussion, pro and con, on this resolution. And as Ellen said, even though there was, I won't even call it heated, but I mean quite enthusiastic and spirited discussion about this, people were still respectful. So that resolution passed 407 to 241, and it had needed a 2/3 vote for passage. All of the other resolutions got the 2/3 vote. That one was it was defeated. It was voted. I'm sorry. I'm talking about something different. It was passed. It was passed. I'm talking about something completely different. Sorry. There was another thing after the genocide resolution, which was completely different because it was something that originated in UCC administration, which was a proposed revision, not a resolution, a proposed revision to the UCC Constitution and bylaws to have the AGM, that's Sherry Presteman, appointed rather than elected. And I think UCC administration thought this would sail through and nobody would think there was anything wrong with it. Largely because of the current political situation where the unitary executive mission of the government is increasing the power of the executive branch. A lot of people saw immediately that this seemed to be a similar sort of thing, increasing the power of the executive branch of UCC and diminishing the power of the conferences and the local churches. And so there was a lot of discussion about this. The people who were in favor of this resolution kept saying, well, Karen Georgia Thompson is not like the people that you're thinking of that are trying to have a unitary executive in the United States, but they did not carry the day. So this vote that I mentioned, the 407 to 241, was a vote against this proposed revision. So the UCC Constitution and bylaws have not been amended. The gentleman here is one of the moderators who conducted the voting. He was great. He was very calm and just marvelous. And I liked his shirt too. After the plenary, this was the third plenary of the day, members of the Southern California Conference that was there, delegates and visitors like us, met on stage for a group photo. I tried to get that photograph from our conference, but it's not up on their website. I don't really know why, but this is a selfie that Mike took of the three of us. We are all wearing Southern California Nevada Conference t-shirts, which they provided to us, which was kind of nice. Okay, on Tuesday, so there was plenary number 7, which ended the voting on the resolutions, and after that, we flew home. We missed plenary number 8, which included more speak out, that's people getting up and telling what they think, the closing ceremonies, and information about Synod number 36, which is going to be held in Cleveland in 2028. And I think that's all that I have to say. Anybody have questions?
Thank you. Thanks, Victor. Just a sec. Yeah, Jack. Just want to say that I forgot what I want to say. Jack, go.
I'm curious as to find out what UCC sees as progressive versus traditional or conservative. What defines those two separations?
One of these things, I think, that you recognize it when you be difficult to get a definition.
There was certainly no definition presented.
Do you think there's division within the UCC today?
I think to some extent, yes, but it's not like there's a lot of arguing. about it. I think it's more important for people to be able to worship together than to agree on every jot and tittle of doctrine or policy. I thought for sure I was going to remember this great thing I had to say, but I know what I wanted to say. So, we just kind of did this on a whim, but I think the church should send the moderator to the next one, and maybe several representatives. And I think if we work with the conference over the next few years, if we don't make it to delegate status for the next conference, the next synod, we should do so by the following one. So we have to make ourselves useful to our conference, I think, is the major thing. So there are conference committees. Maybe some of our members could join those committees, work with other conference people from other churches on policies, practices, joint efforts. I can believe that was the case. We have a problem with long-term memory sometimes. I certainly have a problem with long-term memory. Yes, Pat.
I can give you a little background. The church was not really involved in UCC. People didn't even realize we were part of the United Church of Christ. It began when we finally hired Mark, we began to understand that we were part of UCC. When I was moderator, we passed the 5 for 5 church thing, but it fell by the wayside when we got our interim, who had a very bad opinion of active UCC, and then it's picked back up. No, BJ or whatever his name was. Yeah, when I tried to get the 5 by 5 recognized again, he just thumbs down. So anyway, so that's kind of, we've been up and down. So, and now with Mike is Disciples of Christ, but now he's done all the work to be UCC, and he understands it more. I think it'd be a good time to try to become a little more active. A lot of us went to the Long Beach synod when it was here. We volunteered, and there were, probably 20 or 30 of us.
Wow.
That went there. So there's people with some experience, and Mike Zarro is one of them, obviously.
Good. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Tom. It wasn't Cincinnati. Cleveland. So it says Cleveland, 2028. Yes. Yeah, it's still Cleveland. Go ahead.
Looping back on the question about potential sources of division within the UCC. Obviously, there's a 50-50 division on O&A, but I guess the congregations who aren't like passionately opposed to it or anything like that, apparently. But the one, you did say there was a small town in Colorado where a group spun off and made a separate church. What was the driving force for, you said it was social action?
Well, it's a combination of social action. It's a little, right. It's that the spin-off group wanted more social action.
Right.
Yes.
The degree to which the church was involved with social action was the driving force for creating the new congregation,
yes.
right? Is that typically kind of the dividing?
It's one possibility. I'm sure sometimes a church becomes more progressive and a few people spin off a conservative new church. But anything can happen. But ideally, we stick together. I lost my thought again. Yeah. It's going to stay elusive. Anyway, thanks. Yes. Becky.
Well, one thing about UCC, there is no creed, and there are no bishops.
Yes.
So it's much looser organization than many of the other mainstream, denominations.
That's a good point. And I think I just realized what I meant to say about the O&A issue, and that's that I think most although around 50% are not ONA, they are mostly smaller congregations in rural areas. So I think if you look at the total number of congregants in ONA churches, it's a good majority.
Oh, one other fun fact that you talked about OWL before, our whole lives. That was actually, I was when my kids were little, I was actually in a Unitarian Universalist church up in Santa Monica. And that's actually a joint activity between the United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalist Association.
Thank you.
I don't know if there are others as well, but I know at least those two are involved because OWL was a thing when my kids were growing up. Yeah.
I was surprised to learn that we have a close relationship with Unitarians.
Well, you know, some people think UCC stands for Unitarians Considering Christ.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Others? Thank you so much. Mary, what's up next week?
Next week, I think it's fascinating. I hope you will. We're going to talk about Nazism in the United States. There was a large movement. You may have seen videos of the Nazis meeting in Madison Square Garden in 1930 something. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Who knew? I never heard anything about that.
How long is that video?
I think it's about an hour. It's like 50 minutes or something.
So if we have time after that, maybe I can take a few minutes to talk about this fabulous book that I read all of, although parts of it were sort of dry, called Hitler in Los Angeles, which is just an amazing book about Nazis, not just in Madison Square Garden, but actually Nazis in Los Angeles. And it's really incredible. And I, if I can find the book, which I think I know where it is, and if somebody would like to borrow it, be welcome to.
Yeah, they had camps, and you send your kid to summer camp to learn to be a Nazi. Pretty amazing. And there were a lot of them across the country, more focused on the East Coast. But anyways, it was an eye-opener. And then, yeah. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to have Sheila, I think. I think that's the following week, the 17th. So anyways, I hope you come back. Thank you for coming today. We'll talk to you next week.